Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Alder, and as CEO of EcoForce Global, welcome to Planet Changes Live. This is a program that we've introduced to hopefully share with people around the world really what's happening on our planet and practical ways in which we can actually support our planet and nature. So this will be the first of a fortnightly series, which we hope will go through next year on a range of different subjects, whether it be discussions about oceans, land, trees, vegetation, waste, water, you name it, we want to talk about it. And if you have a suggestion as to a guest that you think we should hear from, or someone that you've heard of and you think would be great for other people to hear, then we'd love to get your input and suggestions on that point. So let's get into tonight's presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to hear from Rob de Laet. Rob is even I've had a conversation or two online and I've watched a number of Rob's videos and truly inspiring. Rob is the founder and director of Cooling the Climate Project and the Arara platform, where he's pioneering regenerative finance and ecosystem restoration at scale, which is what we all love. He has worked across the Amazon, Indonesia, and the Panama Canal watershed and the Atlantic forest in Brazil, helping communities, governments, and global alliances regenerate degraded landscapes and restore the water cycle. He's co-author of the book Cooling the Climate, and I'm into it, and it's a great book, so it's a great read for everybody. And a leading advocate for the biotic pump theory, showing how forests act as planetary heat engines that regulate rainfall and cool the earth. Rob is also the fellow of the Global Evergreening Alliance and Schumacher Institute and a member of the Eco Restoration Alliance. Over the past decade, he has combined hands-on restoration in Brazil with global system design, proving that nature-based solutions, if scaled, could cool the planet within 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Rob de Laet. Rob, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Charles, for having me. Hello, everybody. Wonderful to be here. I'm calling right now from Amsterdam, where it's morning, a sunny morning, as you can probably see in the shadow behind me or the sunlight behind me. And I'm very happy to see all this greenery behind people. We're obviously in a very green environment. I have one question. Is everybody here from Australia? Because some of my pitch could be focused on greening Australia. So I was wondering. Charles obviously is. Karen is nodding.
Karen's from Australia. Archie's from Cameroon.
Okay.
Wendy and Mark are also from Australia. Wendy's from up in North Queensland, and Mark is a biodynamics farmer in southern New South Wales here in Australia. And
wonderful,
great contributor to the agricultural discussions around the world on various different platforms. So there are some other people, Rob, who may come in or out during the presentation from other parts of the world.
Sure.
But otherwise, let's rip into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I've given a little bit of bio introduction, but what actually inspired you, or have you always been in this space of looking at nature and the challenges that it faces?
Well, let me start. So I'm 70 now, and the story goes back actually till I was 16 when I read Limits to Growth, and I realized that humanity was getting into a pickle. And then after that, so I studied philosophy, but I thought that was kind of boring. So I actually roamed the planet for a couple of decades. And so I always say I know my planet pretty well. And while I was enjoying this wonderful journey, at the same time, there was always this chip on my shoulder, this shadow looming in the back, that there was something terribly wrong and in the direction we were going. 1988, James Hansen talked to the Senate about climate change, and I was aware of that since then. The only thing I remember thinking then is, well, that's so obvious, we're going to do something about it, which obviously is not the case. And then in 1996, I started an adventure travel company. And it was the first time that I really did something with enterprises, because I had to make some money. My lifestyle of just roaming around on a shoestring didn't work anymore. So that made me, that was quite a successful thing. And 10 years later, I exited, and I made a good bunch of money. And And then when I got out of that 10 years of working very hard as an entrepreneur, I opened my eyes to the world again. I said, my God, they haven't done anything. So with part of the money that I got, I bought a small valley in the destroyed rainforest in Brazil, the Atlantic rainforest, not the Amazon, to start to replant and rewild over there. And that was an incredibly inspiring period. I just came back from there. I'm still there, and nature taught me a lot how fast it recovers its own resilience, but also the microclimate if you just give it a little bit of help instead of kicking it all the time. So since 2010, I've basically been full-time busy finding climate solutions. And more I realized that while the official story of IPCC is almost entirely about the greenhouse gases, which obviously do heat up the planet, let me not make any, not given any denialist a chance to walk away with my words in the wrong way. But there's another story which is completely not understood in those models, and that is that vegetation, the biosphere, is actually very active in regulating its own climate. And the healthier these ecosystems are, the more it mitigates local climate extremes. And on a global level, especially the tropical rainforests have evolved over the last 150 years or so as the largest cooling organs of our living planet. And this cooling process is not through the carbon cycle, it's through the water cycle. It's evapotranspiration through the leaves. As soon as the sunlight hits the leaves, the photosynthesis starts. Then water is evaporated in quite large quantities through the leaves. And together with so-called bioaerosols, small particles that are sent up straight away, this vapor goes up into the air, and then these particles, they form the landing platforms, if you like, to recondensate. So what happens at that moment is that there's heat taken from the forest floor, from the surface of the earth, packed into water vapor, because it takes a lot of energy to go from liquid to gas.
Right.
Then it is recondensated in the form of clouds, and through the bioaerosols. So this process, this is the first step of the air conditioner, takes a lot of the heat that comes in from the sun, from sunlight, and takes it to cloud level. Now, obviously, there's much more sun coming in the tropical spheres, and so that's where it's the vegetation has been evolved better than everywhere else to pack that heat and put it back up into the higher atmosphere.
Right.
Now, at the moment that this happens, so when clouds form, several things happen at the same time. First of all, it forms an umbrella against sunlight, so that cools the place under it, obviously. And at the same time, it creates the possibility to have a rain. So it's a machine that actually rehydrates the earth under it. And at the moment that water vapor collapses into a liquid, actually it shrinks in a volume of about 1,000 times. So there's an underpressure which actually forms wind. It pulls air up at cloud level, and that gives, on the ground level, gives a side pattern, which, especially with forests on the coastal area, pull in moisture from nearby oceans. So there's a mechanism there that draws in humidity into the continents. This is called the biotic pump.
Okay.
And large forests therefore are able to not only cool but also rehydrate the lands behind it. Then the last thing that happens, and this is a little bit technical, but the moment that this this state of change from vapor to water, liquid water goes, the energy that was taken up at the forest floor is re-emitted as infrared radiation. A large part of that leaves immediately out into space because it's in a certain frequency that does not get picked up by the greenhouse gases. It's a complex story, but basically it's a two-step air conditioner. One, take the heat from the forest floor, pack it into water vapor, cloud level. There the clouds form shadow and cool. They start to form rain, start to form wind, and also export heat out into space. This system is not basically a part of the IPCC models, and is an enormous large gap in our knowledge. And once you fill that gap, you suddenly come to the conclusion that if you do a strategic regeneration of the biosphere, specifically tropical rainforests, but also the degraded ocean biology, then this will increase cloud cover, precipitation, local cooling, and if you do it at scale, global cooling. So that's basically the story I'm telling.
Okay. Okay. So why then do you think the world is so focused on CO2, so narrowly focused? Because we hear it all, in conversations around climate, is that it's all about reducing carbon dioxide in our planet. And depending upon where you look through history, there are levels of CO2 which are higher than what they are today. But we seem fixated on it. Why is that we're so fixated on this and we don't consider these other environmental impacts as part of the equation?
Yeah, I can tell you a funny anecdote, which is actually from one of your countrymen, Walter Jene. I hope people are aware of one of the grandmasters of this story. According to Walter, and I can't verify it, I've never seen it corroborated in another story, but during the time of Jimmy Carter in the US, scientists came in and said, Mr. President, we've got a problem. The world is heating up, and it's caused by two things, which is the increased CO2 in the atmosphere and the degradation of the water cycles. He says, okay, can you quantify that? And they said, well, basically the CO2 we can quantify, but the water cycle is so complex we can't get it into computer models. So then he said, well, just give me the data about the CO2 then. So if that's true, I can't tell you, but it sounds like a funny, but the truth of the matter is that it's very easy to measure global CO2. It's roughly the same everywhere, and it's piece cake. And while water has this peculiar thing, but what people don't understand is that water, of course, it refreshes us and we can't live without it, but it's actually an energy transport mechanism, and especially its change in state from ice to liquid to gas and back packs a lot of energy into different states. It releases it at when it goes back into a lower state, and it absorbs a lot when it has to go from one to the other. To give you an example, if you warm up ice at 0 degrees, the amount of energy that ice of 0 degrees absorbs till it's water of 0 degrees without any temperature change is the same amount of energy that is necessary to warm up water from 0 degrees to 80 degrees centigrade. It's a huge amount of. So it's not, you can't model it because all the time it functions differently. And I think the most important reason is that it isn't modelable. And if they can't model it, they sort of forget about it.
Right.
It could be the explanation, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's a huge omission, because if it's true what not only me but a large group of scientists are saying, that we're actually missing an enormous instrument to actually do something about the climate crisis.
Well, it does. I mean, when you talk to people, they're looking for scientific proof, and I suppose if you can't put any scientific proof in, in around water, but you can put scientific proof around numbers of CO2 going up in the atmosphere, then that becomes something that they can measure, and that's what they want to talk about instead of the unmeasurable, I suppose.
Yeah. At the same time, you can ask a 5-year-old if you take them to a good, healthy forest. They understand immediately that a forest cools, and it's not just the shadow, it's also this evapotranspiration that is taking place, especially on hot days. And the other one is we all understand that water refreshes. You take a shower, and so it's so intuitive, so that it's almost weird that we only focus on a gas that's a very small part of the atmosphere that you can't smell or see, while water is something we're very familiar with, and we know it cools, we know it refreshes, we know it's necessary for life. It's
Mm.
weird, actually.
Yeah, indeed it is. So if the water cycle is as important as CO2 reduction, or more, even more importantly, a component of cooling the planet, which is roughly the subject of tonight's conversation, where can we are we seeing political leadership or even community leadership around doing practical things to cool the planet? Or is that a strategy that we need to develop around the world to engage people in the simplicity of supporting the water cycle?
Um, so this process that I just described is quite often called the green water cycle, because it's the water cycle that goes through the vegetation, being driven by the vegetation. I
Mm.
just this morning got a message from another Australian friend of mine. She said that the UN has just begun to write a paper on how green water can cool the planet. So it's slowly getting there. Actually, locally, everybody knows, and we have thousands of scientific reports that show, and we don't even need that to show that if you have a big park in a warm city, then the park cools not only the park but also the surroundings. So local cooling is not something that is discussed or that is controversial. The step from local cooling to global cooling, of course, 70% of the planet is sea. So can we cool just by increasing greenery on the land? And the answer is no, but then the second part of the story is actually that also stuff needs to happen in the oceans.
Yeah.
And also in the oceans, it's not well known. I know that you work with Brian van Hertzen,
Yeah.
and I know Brian, uh, it's not known, for instance, that all healthy ecosystems on the ocean also produce clouds and rain, including coral reefs, kelp forests, seagrass. And because they give off these also bioaerosols, it's a DMS. It's a sulfate composite that actually triggers the bioaerosols that then make water in the water column condensate.
Right.
So the same, not as strong as the tropical rainforests do. They are the champions of this process. But you can also get more cloud level, more precipitation by healthy oceans, and we have degraded them by an incredible amount. Not just degraded, also polluted, poisoned, etc. And we're getting the bill now.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, and I when I do talk with Brian about these sorts of issues, um, the job for our oceans is bigger than the job for our land-based. Although it would seem easier for us to plant trees than it would be to deal with issues in our ocean. Um, so it's interesting that we talk about rainforest and water, because I've always thought, and I've always said to many people that I talk to about this, that you simply have to look at the areas of land where there are no trees and no vegetation and compare the rainfall there to the rainfall that we see happening in our forests and our rainforest areas, where the natural, and particularly where Wendy is in North Queensland, there's lots of rainforests up there, lots of trees, lots of vegetation, and it gets lots of rain. But in western parts of Queensland or New South Wales, where Mark and I have done work before, it's very dry and there's very little coverage of vegetation. There might be some grasses, but certainly not the trees and the other sort of plantations that are around that trigger the rain in these rainforest areas. So it sometimes bemuses me that people don't see that direct correlation between no vegetation, no rain, lots of vegetation, lots of rain. How they seem to just ignore that or just not understand it. What's your experience in that regard? Yeah.
Well, it's actually, I talk to a lot of people who are in water management, and they start talking about the whole thing. I said, "Oh, you forget the first chapter. All water on land first has to fall. Why are you not looking at the first part of the cycle?" Because they're always thinking about it once it has fallen, but you can actually do something about rainfall, and it's that simple.
Right.
And actually, if you because I knew this was a little bit Australia focus. Australia is actually a very good example of what can go wrong with the water cycles. Okay, this is a little bit of speculation, but we know for sure that about 6,000 years ago, Australia was much greener. My guess is, okay, it can be. It can be part of the language cycle changes, but I think another thing is that the Aborigine way of hunting, as you know, was with fire. So once you have enough population so that vegetation can't recover, then this can permanently damage the forest cover, the tree cover. So, and once you do that, basically you take out the rain production overland. And I'm sure that after Cook, the colonialist made it worse. So you see actually that probably Australia over a couple of tens of thousands of years has dried out. In large part through human intervention. Then the question is, of course, can you reverse that? And I think you can, especially on the northwest side. Let's say the Kimberleys, that direction. If you see that the Indian monsoon is actually bringing enough moisture over these areas. But there's just not enough bioaerosols to bring the moisture down. So it sort of falls flat on its face without raining out. And so and this is so I'm a great fan of Walter Jehne. Yep. And Walter's his health is deteriorating, so he won't be very active, I presume, anymore in these fields. But his great wish is actually to restart the monsoon over Australia by introducing coastal forest canopy covers over the northwest and draw in more of that moisture and let it rain down. And then I know you're a tree planter, and that's wonderful. And at the same time, I would also like to say is that you don't have to do that much. The most important thing that you could probably do in these dry areas is put up what I call beaver dams. There's obviously no beavers in Australia, but small dams or swales on contour, as they say in permaculture, to simply make sure that there's no water runoff and that it percolates into the soils. Most soils actually have enough seeds to make reforestation of local vegetation possible. So it's probably, I would say, but I'm not an expert here, but I would say that let's say you put in 1 million small dams, we're talking a foot high maybe, at the right places, so that there is no runoff and the water percolates in. You get so many different effects straight away. First of all, as long as soil is moist, temperatures can't get over 50, 40 degrees. It has to be dried out actually to get over 40, 41. Secondly, it can wake up the seeds that are there. So you get a regreening. And so it's not that difficult to regreen, and active replantation is absolutely part of that, but it only has to be a small part of it if you do it in a strategy. And then if you do that, let's say on the northwest, on an area, maybe, I don't know, this is a guesstimate of, let's say, 100 square kilometers very intensely as a start, you probably see the first rainfall happening. If you combine that with the restoration at the coastal floor of seagrasses or kelp or whatever, it probably even already improves that system. So large-scale ecological restoration can actually start cooling down and rehydrating these areas. And the funny thing is that you are all well aware that the increasing heat waves over Australia that will become lethal if we don't do anything about it, actually start a lot in the northwest, and then spread out over the continent. So if we're sort of nip it in the bud there, then it's possible that this heat buildup over the continent could be diminished. So okay, let me stop here because I talk too much.
No, not at all. It's the reason we've got you here, Rob. But no, it actually. In fact, we've got a heat wave right now across Australia this week, and the whole weather map of Australia is very red and maroon, or dark red, from Western Australia into New South Wales. And what you say makes absolute sense. That if we did green up the northwest, it would possibly reduce that red to being a lighter colour and a cooler temperature. So yeah, it makes good sense. One of the things that's been happening around the world, and we've seen this particularly in the Amazon, is that we've destroyed a lot of great rainforests around the world in looking for increased agricultural production, whether it's cattle or whether it's crops and whatever. How important is it for us to restore these rainforests around the world, to take them back to a point of actually proactively and increasingly absorbing CO2 and creating rainfall, compared to what I believe I read recently is that the Amazon is now a net emitter of CO2. So how can we do something to reverse this rainforest destruction that's happening around the world? Is it political? Is it economic? What are some of the thoughts that you and your colleagues in the industry are thinking and talking about?
Well, I'm very, my daily work is about finding a way to stop the Amazon from dying back. So if we talk about the hydrology over Australia, you can basically see it has happened.
Yes.
And reversing it is difficult. But not impossible. At the same time, the Amazon creates its own rain, creates its own wind, and does an enormous amount of cooling. But it's in the tipping point. In 2023 and 2024, we had the largest droughts in the Amazon, which basically was the collapse of the atmospheric hydrocycle. Now, those 2 years were also the years where there were sudden spikes in global temperatures, which the mainstream scientists have not been able to explain fully. And I can promise you that once we do, we'll see that a lot of it actually comes from the droughts over the Amazon, and actually connected to it, the Congo, which is also we're in drought, because there's a moisture stream coming normally from the Congo and the West African coastal forests that go over the Atlantic and get pulled in by the Amazon and then recycled. And that system, once that breaks down, you get enormous droughts and enormous peaks in temperature. So coming back, if I'd love Australia to do something about its monsoon, and it will actually save you in the future. But for the global situation, the Amazon is much more important. And once that dies down, the total global effect, according to our calculation, will be an additional 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade of warming on top of IPCC models, which is basically show over for everybody. So we have to do something about it. Now, there's thousands of organizations busy trying to do something about it, and it's still going in the wrong way.
Mm.
And what I'm working on is the Arara platform. It's very at the beginning, and we're running on fumes, but the idea is pretty simple. Pay everybody in the Amazon rainforest to protect and restore the rainforest. So we're looking at a digital financial platform that can actually send money to people, and we upload their land. It could be an indigenous tribe, whatever. We can model what they can do in forest protection, reforestation, or put agroforestry there, because agroforestry has the same kind of atmospheric water cycle management that rehydrates and cools. So we can tell them, what do you think? What could you do with this land? What do you think? Shall we do it like this? And then we can calculate how much money is necessary for the forest protection, for reforestation, for agroforestry transition. And we want to get connected to the large funds and lend them that money. And basically, they never have to pay it back as long as the trees grow, so that they don't cut them again. And that then cools locally, improves the local situation, and together, if it's done at large enough scale, will improve the water cycles, the atmospheric water cycles. So that's the plan we're trying, but it's difficult to convince the world to get with it. But I've got nothing better to do.
Why do you think we have all these organizations around the world not collaborating together? One of the challenges, particularly in the charitable space, is there are so many organizations trying to do very similar projects, whether it's in cancer, whether it's in the environment, whether it's in housing, or whatever it might be. Why is there this, and I suppose the environment's no different to every other sector, but surely there's opportunities for greater levels of collaboration to achieve these targets faster in the environmental space. What's holding it back? Is it egos? Is it government money? Some organizations get funding from the US or the EU or whatever, and they don't want to share it with others. What's the challenge there?
Let me quote Clinton, and that's certainly not mentioned for anybody in this space, but it's the economy, stupid. What do I mean with it? NGOs do wonderful work, but it doesn't make any money. In fact, and you can't destroy your planet with making profit and then try to repair it on a handout. Right. So you need to make a business model that actually works, that all stakeholders can actually make money with it to repair your planet. Which actually, if you take your house and you do a big reform over it, like a paint, new roof, whatever, then everybody sees that as an investment. And the bank loans you money, and the locals they sell you material, and there's work, and everybody says, yeah, the economy is doing great. Now, if you apply that to the planet, everybody says, no, we can't afford it, which is completely weird. The largest project that we as humanity need to undertake is to basically restore our planets, natural systems, communities. We all feel that human society is degrading at all levels, from climate to the political, social structure, to mental things, to all kinds of nasty allergies and funny deterioration of health. Mm-hmm. They're all connected, and we sort of know technically how to fix that, but there's very few people who can understand, who can think at this level. And that's coming back again to Australia. Australia has the nice thing that it's both a continent. At the same time, it has relatively a small amount of people living there compared to the size. So it would be a wonderful pilot project to get all these things together, repair your climate, green the country, go to, I mean, you're the inventors of permaculture, switch from toxic food production, etc., to permaculture kind of things, get your rivers to flow again. Let the biodiversity sprout up again. And we all know how happy we get walking through a beautiful forest. Just the mental health effect of listening to more bird song is absolutely amazing. So,
Yep.
we have to come together as
Yep.
not talk too much. There's too much talk in the world. Politics, yeah, but I don't agree with this. Let's come together, and it's like barn raising in the US. The community comes together, and in one day, 24 hours, as long as there's enough beer and there's a lot of fun, then at the end of the day, the barn has been raised. That is what needs to happen. We have to all get together. Don't talk too much. Don't look at those differences. Once we start working together on improving things, the differences melt away.
Mm. Mm. You raised on, and it was one of the questions I've actually wanted to ask you tonight, was which interventions, which things can we actually do? And you touched on regenerative ag, which we have an interest in, and reforestation, watershed restorations you mentioned. Could we cool the planet by just doing those things without doing CO2 reduction and these fantastic contraptions that people are now talking about of sucking CO2 out of our atmosphere? Can we do it all with nature? Do we need technology?
I wouldn't exclude anything right now. The house is on fire, and so I'm not going to say no, we shouldn't do this or the other thing. At the same time, if you see what it costs right now to draw down a ton of carbon through some contraption that is made, we're talking maybe I don't know, $500 or $1,000 a ton. Well, there's a very good instrument that actually does it. It's called a tree. So, and you can do a hell of a lot more trees for that money than building these contraptions, which, by the way, also needs mining, more roads, etc. And trees have this funny thing that they can actually do it without us. I mean, we need to help them a bit. So it's also very practical to just let nature simply do its job.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So where do you think where do we move towards then in terms of if we want to do something in a manageable, sustainable way where people can be engaged in the process? How do we change the narrative so that people understand that they can be part of the solution, in difference to even my daughters, and I've got 3 of them around the 30-year age mark. They don't want to have kids. They're scared of the future, even though they've got me as a father. But they're challenged by the future of our planet. And do we want to bring children into this world? And how safe is it going to be? And we're seeing declining population rates in many Western countries around the world. And this is a significant factor. How do we go about beginning this process of restoration without fear and engage people to be part of the solution, not be bamboozled by so many of the options that are supposedly in front of us every day?
No, it's a very good question. It's a very important one. So, first of all, we have to be very clear about the truth. Climate change is still page 7, unless there's, always when there's a sudden flood or something like that, then it comes to page 1. But otherwise, the degradation of food production, for instance, or the rising prices in inflation, which are partly climate driven, they never get to the front page. It's always some funny stuff of, some local bozo that has done something stupid. I mean, first of all, we have to make sure what our priorities are. Now, the second thing is, the story that we're told about climate change is a terrible one. I would hide under a couch and actually and deny what's happening. Well, because basically it says, well, if we work very hard, we'll cook ourselves slower than if we don't work hard enough. Well, that's not exactly an inspiring story. And the story that I'm telling now, and with me, many people, including Brian, for instance, that if we regenerate the biosphere everywhere by everyone in a strategic and in a concerted way, then we are able actually to fight back this lethal enemy. And we're late in the game. So success is absolutely not guaranteed. But if you see how fast local ecosystems recover by taking care of them, then once the youth sees this opportunity and sees basically light at the end of the tunnel, then I think what all generations have done before us is the moment with their energy and their passion, they say at some point, they kick the old guys and girls out of the way, said, out of the way, this is our future. You're just going to have us to help us with some experience and some money, but we'll fix it for you. But right now, they don't have this light at the end of the tunnel. They're just thinking there's a couple of ways of dying faster or slower. Well, obviously that's the worst the worst way of selling a solution. So we have to understand that it's possible to do something about climate change fast.
Yep.
Carbon is part of it, but I'll also say something which is controversial. But as you know, so far the carbon, maybe the Chinese and Europeans are doing something, but together we're still emitting more and more. In the end, it will be the moment that oil, especially oil, can't be mined anymore economically. That's when it will stop, and that's actually not far away. That could be already in 5 to 10 years. So fossil fuels, especially oil, will phase out itself. And I still think we should do everything to accelerate it. Don't get me wrong. But coal, of course, as a form of as electricity, can be already transplanted through sustainable energy. So what I think is that while we have to push on decarbonization, we have to add this pillar next to it, which is everybody locally start regenerating their own area. That gives a feeling of hope. The effects can be very fast. And then if we do it with everybody everywhere, we're actually going to have us a nice planet and a nice future for our kids. So it's a nice story. It's much better than the one that's sold right now.
It is a nice story, and I know that with Archie in Cameroon, the young people, particularly in Africa, are very passionate about the environment, and they want to be part of the solution. But I think, like we face in Australia, so many opportunities to try and do something about it, we're bamboozled by what's actually the step that we should take. And I think what we've sort of struck on here is that the trees and vegetation can be the most simplest, cost-effective, and almost immediate tool to help reduce our planet's heat, but also prove to people that we're actually doing something right about the environment. And I know in talking with Archie and in talking with people in Zambia and Ghana, a lot of these young people are empowered and want to do something. So it's a great point that you touch on. And I think we need to change the narrative of it's not all doom and gloom. There is power in positive and in hope, and there are practical solutions that we can actually implement. Guys, we're going to be finishing up in about 15 minutes. So if you've got any questions you'd like to ask Rob, please either drop them in the chat or prepare yourself to ask a question. And I know that Mark's got one there, which we'll get onto in a minute. So in terms of Rob, what are some of the lessons that we as societies can learn from previous societies, the Romans and others, and how they treated the planet and the environment. Are we destined to repeat some of their mistakes?
Hmm. Well, first, we have to realize that a lot of the indigenous peoples around the world have knowledge that we don't acknowledge as real solutions, and we have to listen better to them. Um, and by the way, if you think about ancient societies, Iran right now, which is sort of running out of water, they're
Yes.
just talking about getting Tehran moved. That's a city of what, 10 million people or so.
Yes.
And so the water management in that country is a complete disaster. Never mind the political system, by the way. But anyway, um, it, and the Iranians were magic at cooling their own climate 2,000, 3,000 years ago with beautiful gardens. And for instance, they had also walls where they would let water drip down together with sort of channels, together with greenery. They could easily cool their own yards by about 10 degrees centigrade compared to the hot, dusty desert out there. So that's just one example that pops up in my mind. So
Mm.
yes, we all know the solutions. It's not the problem is not the solution. It somehow there is this economic system is driving us to the edge, and the politicians are not listening. I don't know exactly how you break through this nonsense, because it's dangerous nonsense. It's lethal nonsense.
Yeah. And how many of these conversations are you having with counterparts in the industry in Europe and America and Africa? I mean, do you find yourself having the same conversation and getting frustrated that nothing is changing?
Oh, I can't allow being frustrated. This has to happen.
Yep.
But I'm amazed how slow it goes,
Mm.
especially because the solutions are so bloody obvious once you see them.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Okay, so let's Mark's got a question here. He says, what does Rob think about the overuse of herbicide in modern farming that ruins soil structure and limits soil in holding back water or moisture? Chemical ag, what's your position or thought on that?
Well, I think the question answers itself. Mind you, the big problem, of course, is that herbicides are very easy to use, and you don't need a lot of knowledge, and you also don't need a lot of patience. Good soils, as we all know, need time to ripen. It's a society of critters that needs to work together, fungi, bacteria, all kinds of other critters, before they actually are healthy and can ward off diseases.
Mm.
So you always have this transition period, or what I call the valley of death, from going from this chemical operated food system to the natural ones, which can be as abundant or even better, as fertile, but self-sustaining. Well, this stuff you need to repeat and repeat and repeat. So long thing short, we need a lot of understanding by the people who use it to make the transition, and give them also the possibilities to do so, because there will be a few years of less harvest.
Yep.
It's impossible to go from A to B in 24 hours. So we have to do that transition, and we have to drive that transition. Obviously, we have to phase it out. I remember somebody said is that if we go through it, then in 100 years from now, at school they say, and then we went into a very strange period where we tried to grow as much food with poison as we could. We were doing very strange things.
Yeah, it's a bewilderment, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Rob? Karen, you got a question you'd like to ask Rob?
Hmm.
Yep. Meet yourself. Yeah,
And
sure.
just listening to that, I actually watched a documentary a while back on the Dust Bowls in the US, and just crazy things that they do. But I was curious to know, and I'm sure this is a naive question probably, but the fact that the latest COP was held in the Amazon, right in Belém, and they did actually allow some Indigenous voices into it. Is that likely to now actually prompt any positive action out of it, or is the COP really just more talking heads that really doesn't achieve anything much?
It's a wonderful question. I think I'm going to give you a double answer. At the government level, a lot of blah, 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 waste of time. But there's a lot of grassroots growing more and more that you can't leave this to your governments.
Yeah.
We have to take over. Basically, everybody knows the reports, also just the IPCC. It's very simple. This stuff is going to kill us. And the governments are not taking enough action fast enough to get us out of the mess we're in. So, well, kick them out. We have to do it. The grassroots need to just get up and we have to do it together. Don't leave it to governments. And there is a lot of amazing. There's millions and millions of people who are working around the clock trying to fix it locally. And if this movement at some point gets political cloud, finance, etc., I think the changes can be very fast.
Do you think if we could get more of those stories into the media, it would help? And how do you do that?
Well, kick Murdoch out. But the whole cycle about media is about grabbing attention and making money with it, and good stories somehow don't have the same attention and good stories are always slow. Somebody drives up a wall and is dead. That's an immediate story, or a flood. But the gradual improvement of your neighborhood and people feeling more relaxed and have less allergies and there's less drunken fights in families. It's very difficult. So, I don't know exactly how we have to do that, but. The media are a large part of the problem because they don't focus on improving society. They should take their responsibility and together improving the society. And let me tell you one more story that I really like. A good friend of mine, he is National Director of Climate Change in Panama. And Juan Carlos Monterrey. And he has developed a method to, they did it all over Panama. They had workshops everywhere to ask people to engage about the climate problem and what they would do locally to improve their situation in terms of water, food, and other things, and also the climate. And that they bundled that into a national plan, and are now engaging in having everybody to make local plans to improve their own neighborhoods. And I think we need some sort of a movement that maybe is orchestrated by governments, but that is driven from below, that we all put our shoulders on it. It's not about talking. We all have to do things locally. And if we do that with 8 billion people, that's a lot of hands.
Absolutely.
Very true. Wendy, you got a question? Love to hear from you.
It's actually more of a sort of comment. I mean, I sort of think it's really, I'm not sure of his first name, but that sort of Cotter. You want to create change. The first thing you need is a sense of urgency. Yeah. And in the sort of work I do, which is sort of in the ecological educational side, is that some of the most inspirational stuff is happening where that urgency already is. In relation to sort of climate change. So people are taking action. And I think that, so it's, as we've talked about creating hope, but that hope has to be tangible for people. They have to feel that it can actually, to capture that early majority, they've got to feel that it's going to work for them. And so I think the more we can share those sort of hopeful stories and stories where people are actually taking that positive action. I mean, my own experience, I live just outside Cooktown in far north Queensland. I was really interested. We had 2 wet seasons ago, we had a cyclone came through and it didn't amount to much. And then I looked at the weather forecast afterwards and saw the map and saw this black red sky on the time, the sort of the time lapse thing that sort of shows you how much it's going to change over time after. And it just absolutely pissed down with rain. And between where I live and Cairns, they've like 1,000 landslides, roads washed out, people's lives were lost. Nothing in comparison with what, like people, for example, are experiencing now in Southeast Asia. But it was sort of an example where the shit hit the fan, like it was right at people's doorstep. And I thought, because I've been sort of in this space, for like you have and other people here, for decades, I thought, finally, people will wake up. And they didn't. And I think until we can all talk, and we know, as you say, the solutions are there, but until we can get enough urgency and for people to act, and then to be able to have a sort of a way that they can see that's positive and achievable, and it's got hope embedded in it. It's no use sort of waiting for the politicians. Forget.
No, that certainly is not going to work. But so the one thing that I'd like to know, I've been waiting for the disaster that finally wakes up the world, and it hasn't happened, while disasters are happening all the time. I think there might be another trigger. So in the end, if there's young leaders standing up, it could be with music, it could be with let's say the Beatles of the 2030s, that could sort of arouse a generation, shake off this bad deal that has been handed to them by us, and say, we're gonna do it. It's our planet, it's our future. Get out of the way, and it has to be fun. Young people want fun. They want to have excitement, and if we can't get leadership to show that this could be an exciting, adventurous way of basically regaining the future, then I don't think it will happen, and then we'll get into catastrophic situations. We need that energy from the young generation, and they need to see the possibilities and say, get out of the way, you old farts. sorry, my you're Aussies, you're like Dutch. You can have a word or two like this.
Yeah, we can indeed. Which is great, because Rob, exactly what you and Wendy have just touched on is what Archie's question is aside from global discussions with limited actions, what best practical solutions do you recommend young people to take, considering their huge potential energy but yet limited resources? And I suppose you've really touched on that. It's get active, it's get frustrated, it's do something about it. Whatever it is, it's do something. But what do you think is the easiest thing they could do? I mean, just last week we had a whole bunch of floating rubber dinghies made out of oil floating off a coal port in New South Wales, blocking coal tankers taking coal to foreign countries. And these kids, young people, 18s, 20, 25-year-olds, were protesting about these coal carriers, but were floating in rubber dinghies made out of oil. What can young people do, or have you seen anything around the world in your travels that is something that young people could grasp hold and do that's A, not going to cost them a fortune, but B, is simple enough that they can actually activate? Is there anything that you've seen?
Well, I would like to rephrase it. I actually think it's scandalous that the climate movement of the youth is so underfunded, and that when you want to get funds, it's a sort of bureaucratic bullshit to you have to answer hundreds of questions, and it takes months to years before they finally maybe decide to give you a little bit of money. I'll tell you one thing. 2 years ago, I gave $2,000 to a small town in the Amazon. An indigenous tribe asked me for some money. We already had done some tree planting with philanthropic money, but we ran out. But they wanted to continue. And I said, okay, but there's one requirement. I don't want to hear anything. You don't need to report anything back to me. Actually, I met this leader at the COP. And they had been planting 30 to 60,000 trees per month since then, also getting in some other funding. Basically, there were no, and I sent the money to a person. Usually, you're not allowed to send official money to a person and say, well, do with it whatever you like. I hope you do something nice with it. I would, in Africa, I would love to have really millions spent in small amounts of money, let's say $100 a month, to, let's say, 1 million climate activists, and just see what happens. Don't ask them to report anything. So let's not tell them that they can do something without the means that we have out there. No, we have to push for the finance to go into the grassroots everywhere. Mm. So it's a little slight different answers than you asked for, but here you are.
Excellent. Excellent. Anybody have any follow-up questions for Rob? No, we're all good. Excellent. Well, Rob, thank you for joining us this evening and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. There's 4 more now of us who have been educated, and we will put this video on our dashboard for our EcoForce affiliates, of which there's a few thousand who can also view tonight's presentation. As I said, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. And we're all in this together.
We are
Let's do
indeed.
it.
Yes,
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.